Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today for another installation of MEF webinar. My name is Matt Ekram. I'm the MEF advisor here, and joining me is Catalin Badea, VP of Product Management at NetNumber, and Ian Matthews, President and CEO of WMC Global. We have an exciting topic to discuss, and the topic is how new fraud prevention registry addresses a costly industry blind spot. Firstly, I think just a bit of introduction about the topic. We know that we have recognized the importance of sharing fraud data, but we haven't had a safe, reliable mechanism to enable it. The challenge is developing and maintaining a centralized fraud number database that can be updated and accessed in real time by those who need it. So in the absence of such a resource, scammers continue to wreak damage, undetected and unabated. So I think thankfully, with the support and the help of both NetNumber and WMC Global, I think those days may be over. So I'd like to do a bit of introduction about our two panelists. First off is Ian Matthews, President and CEO of and co-founder of WMC Global. He is a co-inventor of mobile in-market monitoring and leads the ideation of spam and threat mitigation efforts. He has been on since 2019, and prior to that, he co-founded and led a mobile consulting company and has been successful transitioning content providers to the US market through engagement with carriers and facilitating multiple program launches. He's been a major force in the SMS in the US since early 2000. So happy to have you here, Ian. And the next, my distinguished panelist is also Catalin Badea, who I'm known for a while now, Vice President of NetNumber in Product Management. Catalin has been instrumental in defining and communicating his company strategy, as well as managing resources and teams to ensure proper development of NetNumber services. Catalin joined NetNumber team in January of 2020, and prior to this, he has a illustrious career roles in Tintag with Tintag, another A2P messaging company, as well as Vodafone in Romania. So with that, I would actually pass the session and this webinar to both Catalin and Ian to kind of go through the presentation, and I'll let you guys take over. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt, for the introduction and for having us today. Welcome everyone to the webinar and to a very exciting topic, I would say. So first of all, some background. Really excited to announce our a new service, the Fraud Prevention Registry, that we launched officially earlier this week, and we've developed in partnership with WMC Global. I'd like to spend a few minutes to speak about why we think this is important and why this is a game changer for fraud in telecom. Sharing data in telecom is something that everybody speaks about, but it's something that isn't done or hasn't been done so far on a broad scale. And this is something that enables fraudsters to essentially jump around the different weak links in the value chain and to exploit one entity after another, because there is no uniform fraud prevention based on data that is shared broadly. In a way, this is unique to the telecom space. I would say in other areas, in particular in the internet world, data sharing is much more commonplace. Bad IP addresses, malicious URLs, malicious domains. So these are things that are shared broadly and are taken down pretty quickly. For various reasons, this wasn't the case so far in telecom. So again, really excited to speak today in more detail about the Fraud Prevention Registry, which is a tool, a registry to enable the industry to safely and securely contribute and consume fraud prevention data. So what it is in more detail, it's a registry that contains information about phone numbers that are confirmed to have been in fraud, various types of fraud. The important aspect is that the data is updated continuously. We know that fraudsters move pretty quickly from one victim to another, from one type of attack to another. When they use phone numbers as a vector to attack, they rotate through the numbers pretty quickly because they know at some point the numbers they are using will be identified, detected, and stopped. So the real-time nature and the continuous updates is key. This is not a list that's published once a month. This is not a list that's updated infrequently. It's a real-time service where data gets added continuously, and data can be consumed in real time via various API integrations, making this really fit to time sensitive fraud prevention policies. As I mentioned, we developed this in partnership with WMC Global, and essentially what our purpose here is to enable the ecosystem to fight fraud holistically. We have a lot of fraud prevention that's being done today. Pretty much everyone in the industry does some sort of fraud prevention. Many really good tools, many really good policies. The challenge is that it's often done in a silo. So if an entity in our ecosystem identifies a set of malicious senders, today this doesn't get shared broadly to the other players in the ecosystem, which enables that bad actor to use the same numbering resources and then continue their attack undisturbed until they go through everyone they can attack. So and also easy to integrate. So it's an API-based service. There is no complicated database to be onboarded. There is no complicated data set to be adapted to. It's a pretty simple API, various ways to integrate with it, and it's real time. So Ian, anything that you would like to add at this stage about?
No, I think you did a good job there, Catalin, describing that. And I think, my contribution is in the upcoming slides.
Perfect. All right. So let's speak about the types of numbers that we have in the registry, senders and victims. Different concepts and both equally important. So a sender is essentially a fraudulent originator. It's a phone number that identifies a bad actor using either text messaging or voice to defraud people. It could be as simple as sending text messages with phishing URLs, but other types of fraud as well. So why is this data relevant and useful? If the participants in the fraud prevention registry have this information, they can block those malicious senders across the entire ecosystem. The victim numbers, on the other hand, these are phone numbers that belong to regular telecom subscribers whose phone numbers have been involved in either data breaches or phishing attacks. So, these subscribers obviously did nothing wrong, but by the fact that their phone numbers are part of, phishing or data breaches, they are at an increased risk of being defrauded. Fraudsters could use the information about the phone numbers correlated with, other information they're able to source illegitimately, and then, potentially initiate account takeover attacks on those subscribers. So, with this data, any enterprise, any financial institution, any consumer of the data who has those subscribers as their own users as well can use the information to secure the accounts and the services they deliver to those subscribers. They can identify those subscribers that are in increased risk, and they can proactively initiate password reset activities, introduce additional friction, additional steps to ensure that, for example, a large amount of money that's unusual for that particular user doesn't get transferred without some additional verifications, because that might be fraudulent activity. So a lot of things that can be done when you think that your user, their phone number has been phished, for example, and they might be at an increased risk. So we're working with WMC Mobile to source this data. Obviously, really critical to have good quality data. There is a lot of data about phone numbers out there that can be sourced, but the important part of it is that we're speaking of phone numbers that are verified and confirmed to have been in this type of fraudulent activities that we described. The information about phone numbers comes from a wide set of industry players, from financial institutions to carriers, data breaches, phishing. We talked about that. So really broad set of data that enables the entire system to be powerful and comprehensive.
And Catalin, let me add to that a little bit, maybe a little bit more color about the two data sets, because there's more granularity, there's more flavor to a malicious sender and a victim number. So let's start with malicious senders, and maybe that's even too narrow of a term. This can take several forms. This could be text message originators that are 10DLC. They could be SIM-enabled devices. They could be numbers of SIMs that are loaded into a SIM box. They could be coming over various A2P channels, whether that's SMS, MMS, RCS, even iMessage. It's really just about identifying the origin of a malicious activity. Additionally, they could be numbers that are abusing voice. And I don't mean outbound calls, I mean callback numbers. So I think most people here have seen scams that don't necessarily encourage you to click a link. They encourage you to call a phone number, and they want to move the interaction off of SMS into a voice call where it's easier to socially engineer someone. And so that would fall within the scope here, as well as these numbers that have scammers on the other side who are waiting to take your call. In terms of victim numbers, there are a few different forms here. One is numbers that consumers are being tricked into entering into malicious websites alongside their other personal data. So, imagine Catalin receives a smishing message pretending to be his bank. He thinks it's real. He clicks on the URL. He sees a fake bank website, and he's asked for his bank login and password, his credit card number, his telephone number, and his address. All that data is extracted and is sent off to the threat actor. And WMC Global's cyber threat intelligence platform is actively monitoring these attacks as they happen. And in many cases, we can see that data, and then we can discreetly extract that phone number that has been taken away with other personal data. And that's going to show up in this registry. So we're going to know which phone numbers have been recently phished. We're going to know that consumer has recently given up additional personal data. We know that that phone number has a possibility of being at risk for SIM swap. So there's a lot of ways to interpret that data. We also look at numbers that show up in fresh data breaches. And I want to be clear what I mean when I say data breaches. I don't mean mother of all breach dumps on the dark web. It's just a bunch of curated data from old breaches. We don't mean stuff that's 6 months old. We mean breaches that happened today, yesterday, a couple of days ago. It's only information that's relevant and is fresh, so that it's still actionable. Because we know that when consumers' phone numbers are exposed in data breaches, they become targets for other types of attacks, smishing, vishing, or other types of scams once their data is out there. And speaking of targets, the other thing that we observe and are actively providing to this registry are target lists. So threat actors do actively curate and trade and sell verified numbers of targets, and they sell them saying these are employees of this company, these are customers of this bank, these people have this carrier. They get very, very granular and very, very targeted in some cases. And so knowing that these numbers are on those lists and are at risk of receiving those malicious messages is very important to companies providing 2FA codes, is very important to these users' banks or other platforms that these users interact with and are authenticating into. And so knowing that context allows security automation to be built around this data in a way that can prevent fraud or disrupt fraud. Because I think prevention is not going to happen 100% of the time, but disruption can if the appropriate actions are taken on the basis of this data. And I think one of the reasons why we thought it was really important to partner with NetNumber is so that this isn't a query service and business automation can be built around this. So it's not waiting for a security review. It's not going into an abuse box. It's actionable and it's automatable so that these security actions can take place across a variety of systems simultaneously if they're all ingesting the data.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ian. And something to add to what you said, the freshness element of it, I think is really important. And it's equally important also how the phone numbers, get removed from the service essentially. So, fraudsters obviously don't stick to the same numbers forever. At some point, they will abandon the numbers and move to new phone numbers. So we also thought a lot of how to ensure that, the phone numbers that are added to the registry get removed when they are no longer considered fraudulent. And we're looking for a couple of signals that indicate when phone numbers might get deactivated, might be assigned to a different subscriber. So there are a few things that we take into consideration there to no longer to no longer consider a number if it no longer belongs to the entity that it was associated with when it got added to the registry. But then equally important, not all customers have the same sensitivity to the time duration between when the number was reported and when the action is performed. So we empower our customers by providing them information like the timestamp when the phone number was added to the registry, a count of the number of reports of the respective phone number across the registry. So these are data elements that we're providing to our customers, and then they can make their own choice. If a number was reported, for example, more than 2 weeks ago, some customers might still consider it a risky number. Some other might say, no, my focus is actually on really recent fraudulent activity of lower than 2 weeks.
I think additionally, just to add to this, I want everybody to think about this in terms of the broader threat landscape related to messaging as well, especially the targets of these attacks. So when I was talking about targets before, I think most people are thinking, okay, these are bank customers or carrier customers, but they also include employees of companies, both inside the mobile ecosystem and outside of it. So employee directories are being exposed. Text message campaigns are being deployed at employees of companies, pretend to be everything from their VPN system to their HR system, and they're exposing corporations to threats. And in many cases, our platform is seeing these employee target lists in advance of the attack, and that data is making it to the registry. And so if these companies can actively be getting intelligence from this registry, they can actually prevent those employees from receiving those messages or prevent those employee systems from being taken over. So there's a lot of value in terms of protecting companies just as much as there is protecting consumers.
Right. All right. Yeah. So go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead. No, I just want to maybe a question for you both about your presentation earlier about this, like if you're an enterprise and you're trying to assess, the need for this, in the context of a broader other types of fraud prevention solution out there, what I guess, if you're going to address this, the use case, the specific, and why this fits in within maybe other system or solution that complement any kind of cybersecurity solution that already existing in the enterprise environment. I think it's very specific to mobile. I think a lot of voice and SMS spam and phishing and smishing. So could you expand on that notion? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is all about being able to match data related to phone numbers to a security event, right? And that can take a lot of different forms. And I do think we have some use cases later in the slides, but one example, especially for financial institutions, they have your cell phone number. Your bank has your cell phone number. And so when they see these numbers exposed, whether that's on a target list or someone who's actively been phished, they know that account is at risk. And so there's this timeline between when a threat actor steals someone's information and when they actually do the damage, right? Like the phishing is going to happen. Some people are going to get phished. What's important is that window of time between when the user is phished and when the threat actor actually attempts to access that account. Sometimes that happens quickly, within a few minutes. sometimes that data goes up for sale and isn't actually abused for a few days. And so there's that window of time to protect that user. And by being able to get to this data very, very quickly through our platform and through our industry partnerships, we can route that data very quickly to places where it can be addressed. And if you think about the Venn diagram of companies, a carrier customer is also a bank customer, right? They're the same person. And so that bank can take action to protect that account, and that carrier can take action to protect their mobile account, which sometimes are being phished at the same time to enable a SIM swap activity to get past SMS 2FA. And so if you think about different systems that can work together, to us, that's really the interesting thing about this capability. It's also really powerful to be both a consumer and a provider of intelligence within the system, because everybody on this call and everybody in the ecosystem has some level of intelligence, but they don't have the whole picture. And so by contributing data to the registry, that's enabling everybody else that's consuming it to be able to see what you see, to be able to see who's attacking you. And that threat actor may also be attacking them. And so knowing what those malicious senders are, it's just as important to report them to the registry if you have some level of intelligence than it is to consume them out of them. And I don't think anything like this exists in this form today. And I think that's why it was really important that we built this with netnumber.
Totally, yeah, I agree with, and yeah, we can look at a few use cases, Matt, and I think that will illustrate the usefulness of the data and how it's actually, how it can be used in practice. So, a couple of examples here. So if you look at brands, Ian already mentioned here. So the key element for brands is that they collect phone numbers of their end users. And when bad actors collect the phone numbers in a data breach or in a phishing attack, those brand users are at risk. They, again, the typical example here is account takeover of their social media account, of their banking account, or whatever other accounts the victim might have. So by using the victim data from the Fraud Prevention Registry, any brand essentially can match up, their list of phone numbers that they have associated with their users with the phone numbers that are reported as phishing victims or as part of data breaches in the Fraud Prevention Registry. And this way, they know that those users are at an increased risk of being attacked and their account being taken over potentially. So again, the brands can reset their password, the user passwords here. They can invite them to use two-factor authentication. If they're not enrolled for two-factor authentication, adding another level of verification is definitely positive to deter account takeover attacks. And then simply introducing more friction for high value or sensitive processes when a certain amount of money gets transferred, when a password is reset. So for these activities, instead of using the standard low-touch flow for phone numbers that belong to victims, it's recommended to implement additional steps, making sure that the user is essentially who they should be and not the fraudster.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, because I think really this extends to any brand that is being imitated in phishing attacks and other types of social engineering. If you think about how one seemingly not that important account takeover can quickly spiral out of control, you think about something like a Facebook account takeover, right? That doesn't sound too bad. Okay, someone got into my Facebook account. What's the big deal? Well, the problem is that 65% of people share passwords across all their accounts. And so someone takes over your Facebook account and they know that you log in with your Gmail account. So now they know your Gmail password because you use the same password. And now they're in your Gmail account. And now they can start fishing around, right? No pun intended. And they can see, a bank statement and a bill from your carrier. And lo and behold, you use the same password for those two. And all of a sudden, it goes from your Facebook being taken over to your bank account being accessed, or your phone being SIM swapped. And so if we detect the takeover at the Facebook level and Google's a consumer of this service, they can force extra security on your Gmail account, and the threat actor never has a chance at your bank account at that point. Because they've been able to block access to your wireless account, which means they're not going to get past SMS 2FA. So I think this is why it's really important that we get as many people participating as possible, because something like a Facebook account takeover can lead to a bank account takeover, but we can stop it much, much earlier in that attack chain. And to Catalin's point, if there's a victim phone number on this list, you probably don't want to send it an SMS 2FA. You probably want to do a different security challenge. And so this is a way to build stronger security around contextual information about a telephone number.
Right. Right. So let's look at another example, operators, carriers. So, a specific use case here is how they can shut down fraudulent senders and SIM boxes in particular. We spoke about the malicious sender information. That's part of the Fraud Prevention Registry. Some of these are virtual numbers, but some of these are even physical numbers belonging to, SIM cards that are put in SIM boxes and used by fraudsters to, pump traffic and attack the mobile subscribers. So with the malicious sender information, carriers can block traffic from those originators, and this way, protect the subscribers that would have received those messages. And Ian, you might want to speak more about the SIM boxes. I know that this is one of your areas of expertise. I think that's a pretty interesting story for the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Catalin. Yeah, I mean, SIM boxes are making a comeback in a big way in the US. Unfortunately, they're manufactured overseas. They're being shipped in from overseas. They are illegal to operate in that they're an unauthorized device that's not been licensed by the FCC. They are being smuggled in through customs, disguised inside other pieces of equipment. Something that, on the shipping list says it is a guitar amplifier. When you actually unscrew the back of it and open it up, there's a SIM box inside. And I mean, this is a real example that we've worked with law enforcement on. Scammers are getting them in from overseas. A lot of them have back doors into overseas, so they can be controlled from other countries over the internet. And then there are local actors that are picking them up. They're loading them with prepaid SIMs. They're putting them in the back of a van, and they're driving around while folks from overseas are blasting out messages from the local carrier network. And they're driving around in a van because they want to hop between cell towers to avoid getting detected, and make it harder for the mobile network operators to hone in on them. So when we see malicious senders and we work with netnumber to say, well, who provisioned these numbers? And we see clusters of these numbers on a particular wireless carrier, it doesn't mean it's going to be a SIM box, but it's a good indicator that we have a cluster of activity that could be from a SIM box. And the carriers have the ability to take a look at their systems and look at things like geolocation, cell towers, things like that to see, are they all in the same physical location to indicate that they are a SIM box. And then a variety of steps can be taken to take them offline, as well as develop intelligence that enables law enforcement to investigate and seize equipment and make arrests based on this illegal activity. So I think this is a really, really interesting way for mobile network operators to identify this kind of traffic sooner and build automation around identification of this traffic in a way that wasn't as easy before.
Right. So let's look at another example also on the malicious sender component, CPaaS providers. So they get traffic from their enterprise customers, or they transit traffic in a wholesale type of arrangement on behalf of other CPaaS providers. But either way, looking at the originator of a text message or the CLI for a voice call and identifying if that particular originator is identified as a malicious sender in the Fraud Prevention Registry is very, very powerful, because CPaaS providers are essential actually in stopping this type of traffic. If the text message or if the voice call can be stopped at that component or that step in its flow through the ecosystem, then fraudsters don't even have a chance to get their message or their call to the victim's device, and fraud can be stopped really, really early in the in its life cycle.
Yeah, I think let's just talk about the ugly truth is that, account takeovers at CPaaS happen. I mean, it's one of the primary ways that scammers get access to telephone numbers. And it's great for them because once they do an account takeover, they're using a stolen credit card to pay for all the messaging. It's just free messaging for them. There's no barrier to entry at that point. And then they just fish more credit cards and the cycle continues. And so, being able to identify that early, I think is really important to securing those accounts. And, we know that threat actors are actively targeting not only the CPaaS providers, but their customers and their customers' customers, all the way down to small business. And unfortunately, they are being successful. Unfortunately, there are places on the dark side of the internet, not even the dark web, with just some nasty places that threat actors exchange information where you can go and buy API keys that are exposed and start sending out messages through these platforms. So identifying that ATO early is really important. And so being able to identify to these platforms that a particular number is sending out abusive messaging also allows them not only to block that number or recycle that number, it also allows them to look into the accounts of legitimate businesses that are attached to that number to say, okay, has an account takeover happened? And what other numbers are attached to this account? And are those numbers also sending scam messages? And so, by having a single report in the Fraud Prevention Registry of one number, that CPaaS may discover 100 more numbers that are also sending malicious traffic. And so it allows very rapid detection and shut off of that traffic. Now, this is a bit of a whack-a-mole process, identifying ATOs, rinse and repeat. So the idea is, let's do it faster. Let's shrink down the number of messages that are going to go out in a campaign from 10,000 down to 500, right? Because we see it early enough and we're able to share this intelligence quickly in an automatable fashion that doesn't rely on someone to check their email when they're monitoring the abuse box or update a ticket, right? I think, some level of review is important, but as much automation as we can drive is going to reduce the problem down to a more manageable size.
Right. All right, let's look at the last example here. Banks and financial institutions in particular, they're probably one of the most affected type of enterprise out there because there is money at stake, right? So the different types of fraudulent activity trying to get access to the bank customers' accounts, and phishing is a typical way of getting access to a bank customer's account and then moving the money to the fraudster's account. So a benefit here is that with data that's in the Fraud Prevention Registry, banks can understand very quickly if their own customers are have been phished or are their phone numbers are part of data breaches. And this way they can, as we talked about earlier, they can secure those accounts. They can, reject or introduce verification steps for unusual transfers of money for that customer's profile. And not only that, but banks are also an important, source of data. So, we also invite them to contribute data to the Fraud Prevention Registry, because once a fraudster is identified, then this is of benefit for everyone. If we know that a certain phone number is trying to phish the customers of bank A or B or C, then if the CPaaS provider and the carriers know about that, they can stop the communication, as we talked about earlier, and avoid that fraud attack spreading through the industry.
Yeah, Catalin, I think this is a really, really good use case, and one of the primary ones. I think there's a couple sides to it. I think banks are maybe even the most complex and sophisticated way to address this. Banks are used to data sharing. That's just something that they do in a different way than other industries. And so it's just as important for banks to contribute data to this registry than it is for them to consume it. And in fact, there are several banks already contributing today. We've been running a pilot for the last year with 3 top 10 financial institutions in the United States. And that's going to continue to grow over the coming weeks and months. But banks want to know what numbers are targeting other banks as well. They want to know, what's happening, because they know that if an attack works for one bank, it's going to work for another. And the threat actors are just going to cycle through, different types of attacks to different financial institutions. And when they hit some resistance, they move on to the next one. And so they recognize the value that if they contribute, others will contribute, and then others will consume, and they can consume. In terms of how they can consume, I think there's 2 primary use cases. One is if a victim phone number shows up in this registry, they should put a fraud hold on that account. Because that phone number wasn't just collected and it's just a phone number. That phone number was collected alongside other information like credit card numbers, like logins and passwords, social security numbers, secret question answers, etc. So they know that it's highly at risk if it's going to be seen in this registry. The other thing is that banks don't want scammers actually getting in and then changing the phone number on their customer's account. And we see this happen quite a lot. We'll see a scammer phishes someone, they get access to the bank account, and then they change the telephone number to some kind of VoIP number so that they can receive 2FA text, so they can interact with bank employees, and the bank thinks that they're the actual end user. And so being able to know, hey, this number, you probably don't want this registered to one of your bank accounts, or you don't want somebody opening a new bank account with this number because it's probably a scammer, right? It's not just about breaking into people's accounts and stealing money. It's also about opening new accounts fraudulently and laundering money or moving money around. So there's a lot of different granular use cases here. I think those are some of the primary ones. But I think, again, I always like to think about, there's that Venn diagram of, the bank and the carrier and the common customer and working together to protect that user. And if both parties are contributing to this registry and consuming from this registry, they're doing that. And that's a really, really powerful thing.
Perfect. Yeah, we're through with the presentation. I think we have a few questions on the Q&A board here. So what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, let's address them. Okay. Okay, let me read through one of them. Just wanted to confirm from Michelle Larson, just wanted to confirm if the FPR, Fraud Prevention Registry, are malicious sender for both voice and text phone numbers. How is this confirmed?
Yeah, yep. I'll start and then Ian can provide more details. So yes, the malicious senders can be either voice or text or even other communication channels like RCS or any of the OTTs. Obviously phone numbers are used for fraudulent activity for a variety of channels. To the extent that it's known to us, we also collect the communication channel that's been affected by that, where that particular phone number has been used as a malicious sender, and we include that information in the data that we provide to our customers. Ian, in terms of data collection and confirmation, do you want to speak about that in more detail?
Yeah, well, just to be clear on the phone number piece, yeah, I mean, yes, they're senders of text. We do include voice numbers when they're callback numbers. So when we know they're numbers that are active and the consumer can call them. We typically don't report outbound calls because there could be spoofing. And what we don't want to do is put a negative flag on a legitimate phone number that's been spoofed. So until we eliminate the ability to spoof a number in any way, shape, or form, that piece is still a little bit tricky. In terms of malicious sender collection, basically the way the partnership works with WMC Global and netnumber is WMC Global is intelligence collection, aggregation, and curation and verification, right? So our platform is out there collecting intelligence online. We also then partner with other organizations, financial institutions, brands, folks who have their customers complaining to them, right? So every company under the sun who's got a Twitter account is getting people, sending them a screenshot of a text message saying, hey, I got the scam message, or is this real? Or they have an abuse box that's full of this stuff. There's also a lot of garbage there. And anybody who's ever had any time in 7726 or 7727 data knows there's a lot of false positives. There's a lot of false reports. The consumer doesn't necessarily know how to recognize fraud or know the difference between spam and scam and phishing. And so there's a lot of data cleanup that needs to be done, or there's OCR that needs to be done to get data out of a screenshot, which can't always be done automatically. So we spend a lot of time validating the intelligence. We want to make sure that every piece of data that makes it into the netnumber registry is 100% accurate. Netnumber's role is distribution. It's getting this data out there to as many places as possible, making it easy to query, making it automatable, and working with WMC to develop additional features based on the feedback that we get from the market as this continues to roll out. But netnumber's already got a pretty big role in the industry as it relates to number intelligence. So it was just a natural fit to partner with them to be able to help provide this data.
Right. Okay. So yeah, and I have another question. I think I can combine these two questions. The phone numbers, both local, toll-free numbers, I think that's a US context, but I think on the international side, does it cover all types of sender ID? Yeah, alphanumeric, long number, short code. So, you guys can maybe also like from a I guess, this is a global problem, right? So, where do we start tackling them?
Yeah. So we've started in the US. We're expanding this internationally. So for the US, as Ian explained, both low standard phone numbers and toll-free numbers are included. We find that toll-free numbers are used often for callback in those fraudulent messages, but they are included in the registry. Alphanumeric short codes, they are more relevant internationally, so that's something that we're looking to integrate as we expand the data beyond the US.
So small correction, Catalin. It's North America, so it's any plus one numbers. It's not just the US. But that's where we've started. WMC Global is a global intelligence provider, as the name suggests. So we already have international data. We just haven't rolled it out with netnumber yet, and that is on. In fact, we had a call about this last week. Is on the roadmap. We don't have a scheduled release date for it yet, but I can't imagine it'll be too long before we're starting to integrate international data in there.
Right.
Okay. Another question. I think let me rephrase that. I think there's a can you please give some example of how WMC monitoring and criteria will add a number to the Fraud Prevention Registry? And I think there's a confidentiality, privacy aspect. So how do you balance that? And that's the question. Yeah.
Well, we're monitoring data that's been exposed on the internet, right? So it's already out there, and it's already in the hands of a threat actor, and they're about to abuse it. So, from a privacy perspective, we work within the bounds of the various global privacy laws. Whether that's CCPA in California and the growing number of states that have their own version of that, or it's GDPR. We take data privacy very seriously and data management very seriously, but we follow the various regulations closely to ensure that data is handled appropriately, within the bounds of allowances of data usage for cybersecurity.
Yep, good. Next question, how is account takeover detected? I guess then maybe question to WMC.
Sure. Well, account takeover, depending on who you are, can be detected in a couple of different ways, right? So if you're a CPaaS, account takeover can be detected because you see a number that you provision show up in the Fraud Prevention Registry, and your customers are generally legitimate companies, at least they should be, and they wouldn't be sending smishing messages or callback scams or pig butchering or anything like that. So it's really an indicator to go take a look at that account and see if there's suspicious activity, whether that's in the traffic, whether that's, wait a minute, there was a login from California 10 minutes ago, and now there's a login from Russia, right? Looking for those indicators, but it's a signal that says there's something not right here with the messaging over this number. Let's take a deeper look at the account. If you're a bank, if that telephone number has shown up in this registry, it means that some of your customers, and that number matches with your customer, that means that some of your customers' data has been stolen. And it's not unlikely that the scammer is attempting to access a bank account for that user, or possibly open a new bank account in that person's name for the purposes of fraudulent activity. And that is in advance of an account takeover. So in that case, they can take steps to secure that account, force an automated password reset, move to an extra step of verification, whatever their security playbook says before the scammer logs in, so that the account data might be out there, but now it's outdated because the password is no longer the same. And the phone number is just an indicator, hey, let's go take a closer look at this customer to make sure that there's not fraudulent activity already taking place or about to take place.
Right. So I have a question. I know you call out, there's a couple of stakeholders in this, I guess, registry ecosystem, CPaaS, carriers, brands, and also, I think, specifically financial institution. As they evaluate this, what will be how do they actually consider, and like how and what could they, where maybe benefit or participate in this registry ecosystem, as I call it?
Yeah, I think it's going to differ depending on who they are and where they sit, and sort of their view on security posture, right? So different companies are going to be different, but generally, all financial institutions are going to view it the same. to the extent that they have an equal level of sophistication in their security processes. So there's a stark difference between like, the top 10 financial institutions and the bottom, however many there are in any given country, right? In terms of the level of security sophistication that they have. So it's going to depend on what their approach is and sort of where it sits on their priority list. But generally, I mean, financial institutions are going to view it, look, is it another signal? Is it going to help me reduce fraud? Okay, how much fraud can I reduce with this? Yes, it makes sense to use this. I mean, they can tell how much fraud they prevented, and that really makes ROI pretty easy. How a brand might view this, could be different, right? So like there's a huge problem right now with message campaigns going out pretending to be the United States Postal Service and harvesting credit card data in a very generic fashion. But the people being targeted are not necessarily United States Postal Service customers. They don't have an account with them, but their brand is being used to do this. So, there's a more complex question with a use case like that. Is this data valuable in that use case? However, they have a lot of this data. Like the USPS knows this is a problem. They are aware of the messages going out. They're aware of the numbers that they're coming from, and they want it to stop because it's not good for their brand. And so that encourages them to be, if they're not a consumer, maybe a contributor, for example. And there's a lot of other examples like that, right? Package delivery services in every country in the world are a really, really common lure since COVID, and they're very, very effective at harvesting credit card data. And again, when you talk about the Venn diagram of impacted users, all of a sudden you've got a postal delivery service, but you've also got a dozen different banks because people are just putting in credit cards into these scam sites that pertain to be the delivery service to release their package from a bunch of different financial institutions. So it really depends on where you sit in the space. I mean, arguably, an SMS firewall should be a consumer of this, looking at how can they build more effective blocking rules based on some of the intelligence here. A carrier might want to be a consumer to identify, SIM cards that are being used in SIM boxes, or to identify, based on the SIM cards being used in SIM boxes, which resellers are continually selling SIM cards to scammers, and look at how they can cut off the value chain there. So I really think, the opportunity is as big as your imagination. There's a lot of different ways to use this data to disrupt malicious activity, and there's a lot of facets to it.
And contact, you guys here in Catalin if you, have any queries or interests. I have another question from the Q&A. If a bad traffic is detected on a phone number, how do we know it is associated with social media account or bank account?
I guess it depends on who you are. Because who's asking the question. If it's the bank, they have your phone number. They know it's associated with your bank account, and they can say it's a reasonable extrapolation that it's a risk. If you're Facebook, and Facebook should absolutely be consuming this data, you usually might even log in with their phone number, but you probably have their phone number in their profile, or as part of their registration process. So I think it really depends on what is your role. But it's all about matching with your customer. Like if you have your customer's phone number, you can look up data in this registry, and if it hits, that's not a good sign. Like that's a sign of a security risk.
Right. I have a question. I think, just to level set, like this is live today. I mean, although you guys announced the partnership, it is available, availability question.
Yeah, it's available. Customers are using it already. So, anyone who's interested to contribute, to use the data, approach us, and we're happy to, discuss the specifics on how to do that, or how, run a POC to assess the value of the data and how that improves, some of the processes that you might have in place.
Yeah. So if anybody, here live or that sees this later, if you want to be a contributor, you talk to me or someone on my team. If you want to be a consumer, you talk to Catalin or someone on his team, or you talk to both of us together. We want to get as many organizations involved in this as possible and drive as much value and disruption to this activity as possible. And the bigger it gets, the more who participate, the more effective it is. It feeds itself, and it's that makes it a really powerful thing.
And just another question, thinking ahead, I know you guys it's live today. What is your, it's going to go international. Today it's available in North America, international. It's coming. What else can we expect? Yeah, if from a...
I mean, from our perspective of the WMC
Yeah, from WMC and that number. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, from our side, I think the two things that are sort of coming up here, let's say in the next quarter, is going to be international data and of a significant increase in volume of data that's going to be contributed to the registry. And that's both by increasing participants and also some feature releases that we have on our intelligence platform.
Yeah, which will make the registry more powerful in that sense. Yeah, correct. Exactly. More and more powerful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So those are obviously our priorities as well. And then in addition to that, ensuring that this gets integrated with as many of our services as possible, where it makes sense for our customers, making sure that across all service touch points, the data is used, and it's that additional level of insight is helping our customers to make better decisions.
I have more of a, since I have a few minutes here, more of a, I was talking to some the same issue in other parts of the world, and regulatory seems to be a topic. Like, how does regulatory play a role? I mean, what are your views on regulatory? I mean, are they part of, should they be part of the conversation? Or is it just a kind of a volunteer self? If the ecosystem, the CPaaS, the brand, the enterprise, and the carriers participate, we have a solid solution in place. So what are your thoughts about regulatory and their involvement, if any, or participation in different markets?
I mean, it's a good question. It's also a complicated question given the wide variety of regulators and regulatory climates in different countries or different regions. I think the role of regulatory is up to them, is how much they want to regulate and how much they want to be part of the conversation. I think we're happy to engage with anybody who wants to understand this and understand how it works. Ultimately, our focus is not a regulatory focus, right? This is not necessarily about regulatory compliance. This is about protecting the user and shutting down fraud. And I think we have to draw a line between cyber threat intelligence and cybersecurity and regulatory, which can get political. So I think regulatory is going to take an interest in what we're doing. But regulatory is not the first thing we think about when we get up in the morning, if I could put it that way.
Yep, well said. Okay, so I guess, my last question, call to action, like maybe you already answered it, but maybe it's worth repeating again. How can companies participate in the Fraud Prevention Registry? What is the best way to get involved? Yeah.
Get in touch with Catalin and myself. You can reach me at ian.matthews@wmcglobal.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Some of you probably already know me or know people who know me. So I'm happy to speak with anybody about this, and I'm sure Catalin is as well. We want to get as many people involved in this as possible. I think, if I could say a vision for the future, that's going to be every company in the fraud value chain is participating as both a contributor and a consumer of this data, every one of them. Any company that has their customer's phone number or their employee's phone number in a system could use this data in some form to protect someone. And so the more that we get, the more powerful this becomes.
And even if they come from remote, countries, international, you want to have a discussion with them as well. I mean, not just beyond.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't flip a switch and make it all the features available in every country in the world overnight. And I think, there will be some short list of broad support. So we have the capability to deliver intelligence about victims, for example, for any country in the world where we're observing the malicious activity, right? And our platform is seeing that data fly across the internet. We don't necessarily have partners contributing in every country in the world. And so the contributor side of things, outside of general intelligence collection, is going to take some time to scale up, both domestically in the US and internationally in other markets. And so how that's going to scale, I think that's still part of the conversation WMC and netnumber are having about sort of how it spreads out to various markets. But it's coming, and we want this to be available in any country that's possible, because the same scams that we see here in the States, we see in the UK, we see in Europe, we see in Australia, Singapore, pick your country. They're happening everywhere in every language. And the approach to this doesn't really change much in different regions.
Catalin, before we end, last thought, takeaway. Yep.
Yeah, no, totally. So reach out to us. It's a unique solution. We're not aware of anything similar, and we believe this is a game changer. So reach out to us to talk about how that might be useful to you.
Great. So I think we should. If otherwise, I'll end this webinar. Thank you guys, both Ian and Catalin. It's been, for me at least, been an eye opener. Learn a lot about what you guys are doing in the fraud prevention space, and especially addressing both SMS and voice fraudsters. So thank you again, and thanks for the audience for participation. Thank you for all the questions. Again, I just want to repeat, please reach out to both Ian and Catalin, or you can go through me, and I'd be happy to forward your request to both of these gentlemen. Okay, I think we will end, and thanks again. Have a good day, everyone.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you.